Hey there, Business Freedom Podcast listeners. Lars Hedenborg here, founder of Real Estate B School. I'm beyond excited to have a few minutes of our guest time today to really get into what it really means to grow a real estate business. Chris Suarez out of Portland, Oregon. Chris, how's it going?
It is awesome. Thrilled to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you, as I do everyone, are you prepared to share the good, bad, and the ugly about your business growth journey?
I usually am, and we'll make sure I am today.
Awesome. The more bad and ugly, the better, as I say.
Well, I got plenty.
Good. So kind of to get the motivation ball rolling here, has there been, you built an impressive business and it didn't start out what it is today. Has there been any kind of motivational quote or words of wisdom that you've kind of latched onto over the years?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there were early on, and that was more of just always having mentors that told me to work hard, right? And so I did. And then somewhere along the line, when I got into business with KW, Keller Williams, and Gary, I think probably one of the most important things that really got me out of a lot of messes. He said that our greatest business opportunity, regardless of what business we're in, the greatest business opportunity anybody can have is to find some complicated problems and create some simple solutions for those problems. And I will tell you, one, I'm great at complicated problems, but I'm also a really simple person. And so when I heard that the greatest business opportunity was creating simple solutions, I really, like that internally, I said I could do that. Like I could create some simple solutions, and it really became a problem solving journey after that. So I think that had a lot to do with sort of that trajectory turn for me in the first, honestly, almost the first decade of my career versus the second decade of my career.
Awesome. Tell us about a little bit about you personally. Our listeners, they want to kind of get to know you on a personal level. What do you got going on personally?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in New York, so I'm a New Yorker. That has been a blessing and a curse, I think. But grew up in Putnam in Westchester County. Was born in Brooklyn, and got into real estate somewhat by mistake. And I share that because I thought I was going to become an attorney. I went to school, did some pre-law, and realized that every attorney that I interned for was completely miserable. And I quickly realized that in New York, right, it's an attorney state still. And so I was at the closing representing the attorney, and sitting around that table was the buyer, the buyer's attorney, the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, the seller's attorney, the bank attorney, the title. I mean, there was about 10 parties, which was a zoo, which is perfect for New York. And what hit me one day was this, and it sort of framed sort of how I approached the business and who I wanted to be. So I share it. What hit me one day was the happiest people in that room were typically the agent and the buyer, and the agent and the seller. Like typically at the end of the day, they've created a win-win and they have this awesome relationship, and everybody else was just sort of miserable doing a job. What's interesting about that room is the biggest checks also went to the agents. And I just stood back one day and said, I'm on the wrong end of this table for so many reasons. And so I got my real estate license, ended up selling out in New York. And, I realized just a couple of months ago when I took a step back, I said, gosh, it's 20 years later that I'm still here in this business. So it's really, aside from some internships while going through school and understanding what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be when I grew up, it's the only job or career I've ever had was real estate. And it was this focus, and we'll probably talk about that. I lost that focus along the way, but this focus on making sure I got to show up every day and enjoy what I was doing and live now where I'm really clear about that, living experientially, making sure that, I choose what I want to experience myself and what I want people around me to experience, but it wasn't always that way. But when I go back to how I got into this business, it was for that very reason.
That's awesome. Let's go back to the early days of real estate for you, and I'll let you kind of break it up how you want to. Like, into a few big phases of growth. Maybe there was the solo agent stage, and then
Yeah.
deciding to start a team in your local market, and then maybe, spend a little bit of time on what you've done since then. But go back to when, it was just hard. You were trying to figure out how to work with buyers and sellers, lead gen. Talk about the different phases of your growth and the lessons, the challenges that you learned along the way.
Yeah. First, I think it's always hard. I mean, I think that I think if we think one day we're going to wake up and it's easy, then we've just stopped growing or reinventing or figuring out what people need today. So again, there's always going to be complicated problems to find simple solutions for. So I was just thinking, even last week, I thought, gosh, I think this is the hardest I've worked in a really long time, and that's just because I'm solving different problems and somewhat bigger problems for a bigger business. But I think when I go back, when I first started, I had launched a real estate business in Westchester County. I was, I think, just past 19 years old. I looked like I was about 13 years old, and that was a challenge, right? Like, to build credibility. And what I figured out very quickly is I didn't look credible, but I could sound credible. And the only way to sound credible was to believe that I knew the market better than anybody else that they could possibly talk to. And so that put me on this journey that's never stopped, of truly understanding the industry, understanding the market, understanding the sub-markets. I just wanted to provide data to the buyer, to the seller, to the potential client. And I think I won a lot of business on my commitment to researching the market. So I would say this: if someone's listening that's newer, understand it doesn't matter if you sold a home, 100 homes, or 300 homes. Like, that was how I built credibility, even when I didn't look credible. What I realized early was I was probably willing to work harder than anybody. And I'm not saying that as like a pat on the back. It was just, that's how I was raised. I think that was the wrong way to raise someone in business. But my dad was a copier repairman for Xerox from the time he graduated high school to the time he retired. Like, literally, he never did anything else but fix copiers, right? And they asked him to reinvent himself and get into management or get into leadership, and he didn't. That's unfortunate from my perspective, not from his, but from mine. But what that taught me is, every single day for 50 years, he showed up and did a job. And I think that I would have done that, and I was doing that for probably for sure the first 7 years. I showed up, I worked hard. I showed up, I worked hard. I showed up every day. And that consistency is what brought some, I think, limited success, or from the outside looking in, success. But what that also brought was a lot of clients that I had no ability to service them or improve the service that I was giving them, other than my time. And so I just kept on adding hour after hour after hour after hour. And I did that. I did that for about 6 or 7 years. Along those years, I moved from one coast to the next coast. And I think that informed me that something was wrong with our industry, because I had worked really hard in New York to build up a business, a really good business. And then I decided that I made a life change to move out to the West Coast. And then I had to start all over again. Something's wrong with that. I did it again. I moved from Eugene, Oregon to Portland, Oregon. And largely because the business forced me to do that. And I'll talk about that probably. But again, I had built for 5 years a business in Eugene, and then overnight I left and I had nothing in Portland. And I looked back and I thought, something's seriously wrong with an industry that you could work a big portion of your life, right? Important years of your life, and then at the end of the day have nothing. And so those were hard years. And in going back in that 5 or 6 year period, when I was in Eugene and pushing really, really hard to build something really, really big, again, I understood how to sell real estate. I understood how to connect with a buyer and seller. I was committed to my client, and that business kept growing to one day, to be fair, and I don't share this story a lot, but to be fair, I was newly married, and my wife came to me and said, "Hey, it's been a year, and here's what's shown up. You're yes, we're married, like we're married together, but you're also married to your job. And I see how much you love your job. Like I see how passionate you are about your job." And she was a career person too. Like she understood that. She was in TV and radio and loved it. But she said, but at the end of the day, you can't be married to two things. And I feel like I'm kind of getting in the way of the passion for your job. And 3 days later, I decided to walk away from a business because life or a person or a relationship was way more important. And so we moved up to Portland, and that's how I ended up in Portland. So yeah, on the outside, it looked like we had an awesome business, but honestly, it was controlling my life. Like I remember going to my broker at the time and said, something's wrong. Like my production has been the same year after year. Like in the last 3 or 4 years, like awesome production, but it's been the same. So if I take a step back, and I was still a kid, right? I think at the time, I was selling 50 homes when I was 21 years old, right? No one needs that money to live on. Yet, at 22, at 23, at 24, if I'm still selling 50 homes and I'm a growth-minded individual, something's wrong with me. And when I went into that office, I said, "Hey, what can I do?" The answer was, you need to time block better. Like we hear that a lot in our industry, right? Time block, time block. It's all about time blocking. Well, I went back to my calendar, and I'm going to tell you, there was no more time to block. Like I was just like, no, I don't buy like something like that is when, right. My phone never stopped ringing, right. From the minute I woke up to the minute I went to bed, it was real estate, real estate, real estate, real estate, real estate. And there was nothing else but that. Like if I said yes to a client, I was going to deliver, and something was seriously broken. So honestly, it was that sort of that turning point where I had to choose what really mattered. And I chose just, again, a lifestyle change, but it also showed up in my world again. Man, 5 years, 6 years of hard work for what? After I moved and had no business. So that really caused me to take a step back and really reevaluate our industry, and also business building, because I had other friends that I had gone to school with that had gotten into insurance or gotten into other businesses, and they could live anywhere and still have a business, or they could sell that business one day and have residual income. And I had nothing. Like after I looked at myself and I said, I am working harder than them and I have nothing to show for it. So I think sometimes we don't realize that that's what's going on behind those big businesses. And unless we take a step back and change, God, I could still be doing that today. And I think a lot of real estate agents are, and a lot of my friends are, even within the industry.
Yeah, conventional success in our industry it's not a life worth living, when it comes down to it.
I think it's because we're in a service industry, and so we think service equals time. And so as much time as we're willing to put in is we provide better service through more time. We make more money through more time. We work harder through more time. But I will say this, today I look back and I have more off time or free time than I ever had, but my business is bigger than it ever was. So there was definitely an understanding of and a path of time mastery that I think I went on as well.
So your third start was in Portland, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what were the first few leverage points for you where you're like, man, I can't do this more hours. I'm going to lose this relationship. How'd you view leverage at that point? Was it marketing? Was it technology? Was it people? What were the leverage points for you?
Well, initially it was get out of the business. That I leveraged myself out. Like I just said, I don't think I want to do real estate anymore. So I stepped out of it. And about 4 or 5 months after being out of real estate, I realized, like, that's what I know. That's what I love. It's not the industry, it's me. So I got back into it. And right about that time, we found out my wife was pregnant with our first child as well. And I think that forced me to take on leverage, because I didn't want to be a disconnected or an unpresent parent. And I realized that, gosh, I have about 7 quick months to figure this industry out, because I didn't want to be who I was when my first daughter was born. So for me, that is when I started finally committing to building my business around the models out of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, which it's funny, right? It's an old book, and yet I had it for the previous 5 or 6 years. I had read it, said I was going to do it, and I just never did, right? I never set systems, tools, and models in place because I was convinced that we were salespeople and that I just needed to go out and sell. And I think in those 7 months, what I did was I focused less on sales, which meant I didn't make a whole lot of money, which was painful as about to have birth, well, I didn't birth her, but about to give, right, to have a child. I made less money the year before I had my kid than the previous 7 years. And that was a really scary thing, but I was convinced that the systems that I was focusing on building were going to return something in the future. So leverage, right? When you say, well, what were your leverage points? I think immediately we think people, like assistant and marketing person. For me, it was just systems and tools of the business, right? Activity systems, database systems, right? Transaction flow systems, stuff that I never focused on. I had to take time out of selling to put into building those. And I built them, and they were not great because I don't do that well, but I built them, and then I started putting sales onto those or into those systems and tools, realized that they would manage for a period of time. And then when I was ready to go, when I was ready to then say, okay, now I need to build this, I immediately hired a person that actually had a lot more skill in systems and tools than I did. But my first part of leverage was systems and tools and not people.
Yeah. Awesome. As you made the transition from like slinging houses to building systems and getting people to run the systems, and through that part of the growth, did you feel prepared for it? Did you just throw yourself into it? I think a lot of agents, when they think about, building a business worth owning, they've never done it before. They don't know how to build systems. They don't know how to manage people. How did you get through that part of it?
I think a really important piece is recognizing that takes a lot more time than we think and a lot more money than we think. And so what happens to us is we think, hey, I'm going to do that. And then we're not really willing to commit the time, and we're not really willing to commit the money. So the minute it takes too much time or the minute it takes too much money, we abort that direction and we get back into selling houses. So for me, I live really simply, and I still do relatively today. My dad raised me that way, right? Copier repairman raising a family of 5 in New York. We didn't have a whole lot, so I can live on very little. What was interesting to me was I kept my lifestyle very similar to that first painful year of very little income for probably the next 3 to 4 years of growth. So interestingly enough, I didn't take more money. By my third year of really focusing, the business net $1 million. But what I will tell you is there was $1 million in the bank because I wasn't doing anything with that. I didn't go out and buy a bigger house or a different car or different clothes or different vacations. Like I lived a certain way. And people wouldn't really understand that, but I was willing to sacrifice lifestyle for the business during that period of time. And that was because I wanted to make sure that the business earned the right to hire anybody. Another piece of advice, and I remember this quote that I was given by a mentor, is your profitability will be your competitive advantage. Your profitability will be your competitive advantage. And I have used that every year moving forward, that if my business is the most profitable, I I can buy the best system. I can afford the best talent. I could, so the profitability of the business up front um, informed informed the growth of my business. And I think too often, unfortunately, real estate agents get focused on production or volume or units or right houses, and not the fact that, hey, we should be growing profitable businesses. And then the profit actually creates pretty awesome lives for people around us, but also invites awesome talent into our world.
Yeah, and our industry focuses on image and driving nice cars that they can't afford and just living above their means. And so, man, if you're listening, go back to that part, that Chris just went through. I mean, the fact that he passed up, the discipline to pass up the short-term pleasure of an increased lifestyle for a long-term gain. There's a lot to be said for that. That's really awesome. Let me talk a little bit about something that I feel like we don't talk enough about in our industry, and I think you've been pretty open about this so far in our talk. But talk about some of the failures, as you were in the Portland days. So once you realized that this thing had to look a little different, what were some of the failures? What are the pitfalls that you can expect or you hope others would avoid in going down this path?
I think one of my biggest ones was that I thought people were going to solve my problem before my business deserved people. So, right, typical real estate, like I had a lot of leads. I had people that wanted to go look at houses. I just didn't have the time. So I did what other people were doing, and I went out and got a buyer's agent that was also a good friend of mine, because naturally that's what you do, right? You hire your friends, and it was miserable. Like, it was miserable for him. It was miserable for me. Like I didn't learn any leadership prior to doing that. Like I was just, right, I worked hard. And so what's interesting about that is people will show up because people always want to be around success. So it doesn't matter what that means to you. You have a little bit of success and other people want to join you in real estate because one, real estate means you make good money. And two, you look like you are, right, making good money. So people will show up. And so I hired a couple people and convinced myself that they just weren't a good fit. And if I was being honest and I go back, those people probably would be phenomenal fits today. It's just that my business had not earned the right. And I use that expression a lot. The business didn't earn the right to have them, which means I didn't have anything for them to plug in. I wasn't really offering them anything but a lead. But guess what? Anybody can buy a lead. They could have bought that lead for $46 instead of giving me a percentage of their commission. So unless I really had something to give them, unless I really had a simple solution to the complex problem called selling real estate, I should never have hired someone. So the biggest mistake I made, just like a lot of people do, was going out and hiring or asking, licensed leverage or licensed agents to join my team, when in reality, when I figured it out how to do it the right way, my first hire so I dismantled that and I thought, well, this doesn't work and I'll just go back to selling houses. And I did that until I realized, no, this is not what I want. And so that's when I started those systems and tools, right? So building out those systems, building those tools. My first hire was an ops person. My second hire was a transaction coordinator. My third hire was marketing. So remember, now I had 3 salaries and 1 licensed agent, me being me. But what's interesting is I had more time. Like, because I had taken 3 jobs off my plate and the only job I had was sales. So I realized that if I sequentially built the business the right way, then it was a lot easier to, 1, be more profitable. And then 2, when I then finally brought in a buyer's agent or a showing assistant, they had so much value. Like they had so many solutions provided for them. And then I realized, gosh, if I built those solutions, this would be valuable to any agent. So at that point, you could grow or you can scale your business because the value to a real estate agent was there. But my biggest issue up front was not putting enough value on ops people or not being willing to pay ops people what they deserved, right? Like we go into this thinking, well, they want 50 a year and I bet you I could get them for 40 a year. And you do. You get them for 40 a year and then they're miserable because, right, you got them for 40 a year. So I think that just being being profitable allows me to still follow a pro forma and a budget, but being able to give more money to hire talent as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other struggles you've seen, others make in their growth journey, things that we can highlight for folks that want to go down this path that you can think of?
Yeah, I think sometimes we want to grow really quickly, and the quickest way to grow is through buying our way, like buying growth. So in leads that showed up, like I was selling real estate before Zillow existed, right? So all of a sudden they show up. Some of these third-party sites that now either sell zip codes or now just pay us 30% and we'll give you this great lead, right? They're doing the same work that we could be doing. We just were unwilling to do it. So now that lead costs us 30%, right? All these referral-based companies, and I love referrals, right? But these referrals that we pay 25, 30, 35% for, they're just willing to do the work you're unwilling to do. And when you look at a budget, I could do a lot with 30% of a commission. So I think that I have this mantra in our business: we pay for people instead of paying per lead, right? We like people love. I saw a response to hey, I have some budget opened up. What should I spend money on? And one of the first responses was pay-per-click. And I thought, again, this is my opinion, right? My thought was, that's the worst advice we can give anybody. How about taking that budget, building, coaching, consulting, or collaborating with an agent, teaching them how to actually go out and build their own leads so that you don't have to pay per lead. Like, it's a quick way for growth. When people want exponential, really, really fast growth, they'll pay for leads. But here's what I'll tell you. Those people also have people leave them all the time. And here's why. Because your value is the lead that you just paid and handed them. And the minute they close a deal, right, they're going to get the biggest check that they ever received and realize, oh, I could buy a zip code too with that. Like, if our value is paid for leads and not the core competency of how to service and connect and build relationship and bring someone from not a buyer to be a buyer, or not a seller to be a seller. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we make, is we go for easy. And easy, in the long run, interestingly enough, will cost us a lot more money and won't build loyalty to an organization at all.
Yeah. I know guys spending $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month on Zillow, and they've just gone crazy with their pricing over the last 4 years, and I can show them that pillar's losing them money in their business, and they have such a fear around losing that piece of their business, and it's like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, that's one piece of the industry that's not going to help us is the aggregators.
I think a lot of that is fear of someone else getting a lead that they could have received, right? These are people that are successful, so they have money. So they think, well, I could buy that lead more than you can buy that lead. And that's a slippery slope to get down, because then they truly become dependent on those paid for leads, and budgets change dramatically, right? Or other people control your budget as opposed to you controlling the budget. And I also will say, to be fair, do Zillow leads turn into business? Sure they do, just like any other lead. And when that becomes easy, then we always gravitate towards easy as human beings and business owners, when the most brilliant business owners will typically run away from easy. They'll figure out what's more complicated, because that's a less traveled path, right? So again, that early advice that I got wasn't, hey, find simple solutions to simple problems. Well, anyone can do that. It's find simple solutions to complex problems. And if your business does that, then that's the biggest business opportunity. Those are the most profitable businesses.
Yeah, and I think it's Jim Rohn, the quote, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better.
Yeah.
And, challenge yourself to be a better marketer. The future, what got us here is not going to get us there. Next 3 to 5 years in our industry, you better be telling stories and mastering video, and there's a whole nother level of game that we need to play if we're going to be relevant in the future.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that conversation, and not to take it down that path, but if you read Innovator's Dilemma, right, and just our industry is full of innovation right now. But interestingly enough, even in that book, um, in our industry, being consistent is fairly innovative. But I mean, I hate to say it, but the fact of the matter is if we are consistent, if our people are consistent, if you have a culture of consistency, well, welcome to innovation in real estate, because nobody else is doing it. And by definition, innovation is, hey, change the way things are being done. Well, just stay consistent, and you'll be pretty innovative in our industry.
Yeah, show up early to work every day and have your whole team do the same. That's awesome. I love that. All right, let's dig into the current business a little bit. Tell me what the world looks like today for your various teams and markets, and without going too deep, kind of tell us what's going on now.
Yeah, so we built Portland to the point of that business was netting a million plus in profit every single year, right? Year after year after year. And about 4 years into that is the first time that we began giving away business in local communities outside of Portland, just because we didn't want to drive there anymore. Around that time, there were other leaders in the expansion world, in this idea that, hey, if you're a real estate agent, you can go and expand into different markets. So I won't go down all the systems and the processes and the iterations of what that looked like. But today we've done that. We're in year 4 of expanding. We're in 10 different states and 20 somewhat different cities, and we're also in a second country in Costa Rica, where we have someone down there on the ground, engaged in selling real estate as well. So for me, what I will say is, I still wake up every day solving bigger problems with simple solutions. But I also believe that the difficult transition was understanding that at a certain point in time, I became less of a salesperson and more of more of a systems person and a content creator, really creating content for our leaders of how to coach, how to consult, how to collaborate with people, much like really where you spend your time in your world for your organization as well. But we service teams that will do over 2 million in real estate in their local markets, 1 million in real estate in GCI in their markets, as well as Portland is now a part of Experience Real Estate, which is our expansion brand. What I will say is that expansion happened quite naturally initially. It happened naturally in the state of Oregon. And then as we grew, we wound up getting into business with just some talented people that we had created relationships with while we were growing, and while we were just really collaborating with people within our national organization, Keller Williams. And so that's how that developed. It is 100% a mission-based organization, in the sense that we took a step back and realized that that day that I got out of the business was because I realized that I wasn't living an experiential life, right? I was living a real estate life for sure, and I could have kept doing that. I still think that I was one wrong decision away of being a real estate agent for the rest of my life and showing up on stages and showing up as successful in an industry, but I would have probably been somewhat miserable, right, at a certain point in time. So for us, we named our organization Experience Real Estate because we want to make sure that every one of our people is focused on building experiential life through real estate. And that's what sort of guides who we get into business with. That's what guides what our perfect week and our activity weeks look like. That's what guides really our charity. Like, it guides everything we do, just making sure that not just one person on the team or the leader of the team has an experiential life, right? Everything flows up to that person. They have an awesome life, but our operations, our administrative, our transaction coordinator, our buyer's agents, our listing agents can take a step back and say, yeah, I'm experientially living, and real estate sort of funds that or supports that.
That's awesome. I guess for your Portland team, tell us, what are the major buckets of business? What's working really well in that business from a lead source standpoint? And then any things to avoid, any words of wisdom around lead sources that just failed miserably for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, we are activity based, and so any member of our team shows up into our organization. I believe we have the obligation to give them a proven model, right? That's what we should be delivering if someone's going to be part of our organization. This is a proven way to generate business in open houses, with FISBOs, with expireds, with door knocking, with circle prospecting. We call those our lead generation levers. So we have a menu of specific activities, right? Done a specific day, a specific way, saying a specific thing to a specific type of person. We call that a lever because the lever is the simplest type of machine, right? There's only two parts of a lever. It's the lever and the fulcrum. And we just say, hey, if an agent's willing to show up and jump on that lever, we know if you jump on this side's going to go up. And so for us, quite honestly, those are our main pillars. Those 5 are our pillars. The greatest source of business at this point is past clients and referrals, which means we're still showing up and servicing people. But I believe that if we ever get too far, right, we're not a 90% referral-based business. If we are, that just means we're not growing, right? Because we always need new relationships in the business. So about 60% of our business is past client referral, and 40% of our business is new business from those activities. And we feel like that's a very, very healthy growth model. We run a pretty lean team. We have 3 operational people at the hub here in Portland that run that team, and we have at any given point in time about 6 people in the field servicing those clients. They'll probably just fall shy of about 100 million in production out of Portland this year. With that small team, everybody in our organization last year made 6 figures as a salesperson. And so again, we care about per agent productivity, and we believe that if you're gonna follow a proven model and you're not winning, then we're not coaching you well, or we're coaching you well and you're just not doing it. So it's one of those 2 things, and we hold the coaching and the activity highly, highly accountable. We have scoreboards around those 2 things: the coaching that they go through and the activities that they do. And what's interesting is we can show, right, literally with a scoreboard, that if our agents show up 75% of the time and complete their assigned coaching, and if they show up 75% of the time and complete their activity, that every person in our organization that's at 75% of those 2 categories year to date is already either at 100 grand or have closed and pended over $100,000 in income. So for us, that's our proven model. Like for us, when we say, hey, we can get you into production, we hold people accountable to that. We don't hold them accountable to 100% or 90% or even 80%, because we believe that everyone has a bad week or everybody wants a week off. So with that, it's 3 to 4 weeks. If you show up, our models will get you to that 6 figures if you want to, right? We don't label 6 figures as success, but that's what our team looks like. And so we're highly accountable to activity. Where did we go wrong? Probably anytime we went way too deep on the internet. And not that we're not on the internet, but anytime we deviated and went into a what I call a get leads quick scheme, right? Like everyone stays away from get rich quick schemes. Like get leads quick schemes are just anybody could buy their way into production. We could too. And we've done it in the past, and then we've pulled back and said, gosh, how do we get away from that? And so we're really, really clear about being an activity-based organization and an internet-enhanced organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are you most excited about for the future of your business?
I think I'm most excited about getting into business with people that I never thought I'd be able to get in business with, right? I wake up every day and I love teams, right? If I didn't, I would have stayed an individual agent, right? If I didn't want to be around people or I didn't want to develop people, I didn't need to. I can live on about 60, 70 grand a year, truly. So I think I'm excited about the fact that uh, I've had to completely reinvent myself as a leader of an organization as opposed to a salesperson. I don't even feel like necessarily a real estate agent anymore. I feel like a teacher. I feel like a coach. Um, and I think right now, like just understanding business and technology is exhausting, but also incredibly exciting for me. And I just have a different type of conversation every single day. And actually, right now, not a day typically goes by that I don't have some sort of conversation with a potential partner, right? Partner in on different sides of the business, growth side of the business, a real estate agent side of the business. So for me, it's I'm still in sales to some degree. It's just I'm now engaging with talent. I feel like a talent scout, to be honest, for a sports team.
That's awesome. What drives you? I mean, you've come, from the son of a copy machine repairman, right? 50 years doing the same thing, and not. I mean, what's in your belly? What gets you to do this every day?
Um, I think being mission based. I say that we are mission driven, vision focused, and values grounded. And so, I owe a lot of what I do to mentors along the way that remind me of that mission to build experiential lives for me, my family, and those around me. So what's interesting is that comes down to time and money. So what drives me every day is figuring out how to better use my time, how to master time, and then New Yorkers have this expression, time is money, right? Like we say it all the time. Like we know we just don't want people wasting our time. Like time is money, time is money. And that is actually a myth. Actually, in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, Gary Keller said, time is convertible into money. And so I look at that and truly, like, I believe that our organization is able to do incredible good for some other organizations that we care greatly about. We're huge supporters of the Children's Cancer Association. It's an association that has helped people very, very close to our organization and in my life. And that drives me for sure every day, because even that organization isn't about creating or finding a cure for cancer. It's about giving children that are undergoing incredible pain and difficult lives just moments of awesome experience, whether that be through music and happiness or outdoors. So for me, there are always different experiences that I can provide my family and people around me, and that actually pushes me and drives me. But I would also say this. I feel fortunate to have fallen into an industry that, for whatever reason, I have a love affair with. Right? I mean, I just absolutely love real estate, and I love real estate agents because of how dramatically real estate changed my life. I go back of how I was raised, and we really didn't have anything. I mean that, Lars. Like we took one vacation from the time, right, until I graduated high school. The first time I was on an airplane, like I paid my way to get on an airplane. I think I was graduating college. Like we drove to Disney World, and my dad and mom saved box tops of cereal boxes for I don't know how many years to get us to Disney. So like we with that, I always felt like I was a happy kid. I always felt like they tried to create experiences for me. I also realized we can create some fairly amazing experiences with money. So the money itself doesn't drive me, but the wealth that we've created for future generations, as well as now I look at net a million didn't really mean a whole lot to me, other than someone said it could be done in residential real estate, and I wanted to prove that it could be. But I love that net a million move to give 1 million. And our organization is very, very clear that's happening for us. And so, yeah, that, if you're gonna give away millions, well, then you have to make many of those. And so that definitely drives me for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I see a lot of business owners in general, but real estate agents and team leaders specifically, that they really struggle with enjoying the ride. Like really appreciating good, bad, or ugly. Like this is just, it's part of the journey. What practices have you put in place to make sure you don't miss the good stuff, the moments, there's stress, but how do you make sure you enjoy the ride?
I think when we stop enjoying it, when we don't have any time to enjoy it. I mean, there's always something to enjoy in our business. Even when the worst transaction is going on, there's always something to enjoy. And when our lives have zero white space, then there's no moment to even think about what we're enjoying. And it's the noise and the craziness that causes us to not like it anymore. That's where I was. So I think sometimes being willing to get to a place where you'll pull a plug on it gets you to realize what was important and what was not important. For me, it's making sure there's white space. I spent the last day and a half, and I was working, right? But I spent the last day and a half in a place that brings white space to me. I worked from the coast. That is important for me to have that time to just, right, this morning, like I had my hour run on the coast, and that, right, I'm listening to books, and so I still am growing, but I need that white space to be able to, something in my world is I owe appreciation for. So I think that's where you enjoy the ride and realize that, I think when we feel like things are falling apart, or we feel like, hey, I just don't have I can't take the time to do that right now. We've lost touch with the fact that every one of us, if we've built something, can build it again. I remember when I was first struggling with a disconnecting during vacation. Like I didn't lean into vacations. I was a New Yorker. We didn't grow up going on vacations. I didn't need vacations. And all of a sudden I married someone that, took month-long vacations growing up. And so that was a different culture, literally, in my world. And that was difficult for me. But one of the things my wife said to me early on was, you have rebuilt this business more times than the number of years we've been married. So even if you went away and everything fell apart, who cares? You'll build it again tomorrow. And you love building. So really put things in perspective. I think sometimes we actually believe that what we're doing is way more important than it really is. Like, it's important. There's a mission behind it, but we're not saving lives. Like, I'm not going in and operating on someone each day. Everything has a place. And just, I think white space in our world is so important to be able to deal with the craziness that ensues. And you might be catching me on a good day, right? Because I had some good white space this morning. But there are days that you think you want to say, I think I might hate this. And the reality is when you're mission-based, you understand why you love it, right? Or while you get through the difficulties for the good part afterwards.
Yeah. Chris, if you had to do it all over again, would you do anything differently?
Sure. And I will, a lot of people say, no, I wouldn't do it differently because I learned so much in this process and I learned so much in that process. Here's what I would do differently. I would be willing to learn earlier. So I'm a very put my head down work, right? Like, I remember when I first joined an organization that said they were a coaching company, not a real estate company. And I thought, well, that's good for you, but I'm here for your business model and I'm going to go to work. And then I realized that, man, when I let people into my world to teach me, to coach me, to help me, when I was willing to, I don't ask a lot of questions. I love the work that you're doing because you go out there and you put yourself out there and ask people questions. And it's why I said yes to this, is because it's not easy for me to do that, yet I realize how much I've learned. So I think not the only thing I do differently because there's plenty, but one of the things I would do drastically differently is early on in this industry, I wouldn't have believed that I stopped learning in college, but I would have made sure that I had a growth plan and I was learning based every year of my business career, and I would have gotten here a lot faster. It is what it is. 20 years later, right? And in the first 10 years, I did so many things wrong, mostly because I wasn't willing to collaborate and learn from other people, and I just put my head down and worked.
Yeah. As we wrap up, there's a lot of people in our industry that are really struggling. Good market, bad market. They're struggling to get to where they want to get to. What words of encouragement would you give someone that might be just in the thick of it? They don't know a path forward and they're just kind of down. How could you encourage them?
I think gaining some clarity around why we're struggling and where we are. Interestingly enough, our organization recently read the book Predictable Success. And in that, the author sort of talks about the typical trajectory of a business. And it starts with early struggle, right? And so welcome, that's everybody. We're always going to have early struggle. Even if we get some immediate success right away, just wait, because there's going to be an early struggle. And we get through that early struggle phase and get to fun, and we love it, and we think, okay, well, that's what this is supposed to be. Life is fun, business is fun, this is great. And as your business grows, the next mandatory phase to get through is whitewater, which after fun doesn't sound good to anybody. And that is often times we think we're struggling, which means we think we went backwards, right? We think we went backwards. And we didn't. We're actually moving forwards. But we have to get through that whitewater to get to the pinnacle of a business, which is predictable success. Now, after that, we can regress. The author says we can get to a treadmill stage where we feel like we're doing the same thing over and over again. I got there in Eugene, right? And the treadmill turns into a rut, and the rut turns into the death rattle. Those are the stages of predictable success. But I would say is if you're struggling right now, you're either in early struggle, about to have some fun, or if you're struggling right now, you might be in whitewater, stick it out and focus on where you're struggling, build some mentorship or partnerships to get you to predictable success. But anytime I'm struggling, I'm realizing I'm about to hit some fun or I'm about to hit predictable success.
That's awesome. Man, I can't thank you enough for spending the time today. This has been awesome. Luckily, I don't have to take notes because it's all recorded and I can go back and this has been really great. I mean, one of our best, and I think it's going to serve a lot of folks just sharing what success looks like, and it's not pretty. And you can spend 10 years doing the thing that finally gets you over the hump. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you. Anything I could ever do for you, just reach out. Real Estate B School thanks you. So thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.